I want to begin with a simple truth that changed my life. Most people talk about success. Few people study success. But the people who actually succeed act. Over the years, I've worked with millions of individuals, business leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals from all walks of life. And I discovered something that surprised even me. The biggest difference between winners and everyone else is not intelligence, not education, and not luck. It's action. Less talk, more action. That is the formula for success. Now, let me ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with yourself. How many ideas are sitting in your mind right now that you haven't acted on yet? How many plans have you talked about but never started? If this message resonates with you, I want you to do something right now. Go down into the comments and write, "I choose action." When you write it, you make a small commitment to yourself. And success always begins with a decision. Let me tell you something I learned early in my career. When I was younger, I was drifting. I had no clear direction. I worked odd jobs, I struggled financially, and I watched other people move ahead while I stayed in the same place. I kept telling myself that someday I would figure things out. Someday I would start my real career. Someday I would pursue my goals. But one day I realized something that hit me like a lightning bolt. Someday is not a day on the calendar. Nothing changes until you take action. Not thinking, not wishing, not talking. Action. In fact, one of the most powerful success principles I've ever learned is this: clarity comes from engagement, not thought. Most people believe they need to think longer before they begin. They say, I need to plan more, I need to wait until the time is right. I need to be more prepared. But here's the truth I discovered after decades of studying high achievers. The time will never feel perfect. Successful people don't wait for certainty. They act in the presence of uncertainty, and every action creates feedback. Every step teaches you something. Every attempt brings clarity. The people who move forward in life are not the ones with perfect plans. They are the ones who start. Let me give you a powerful statistic. Studies on productivity consistently show that a large percentage of people spend more time discussing their goals than actually working on them. Meetings, conversations, ideas, debates, endless talking, but the highest performers operate differently. They think briefly, they decide quickly, and then they move. They replace discussion with execution. I remember working with a group of highly successful entrepreneurs once. These were people building multi-million-dollar companies, and what struck me immediately was their speed. They didn't sit around analyzing every possibility. They asked one question: what's the next action? Not the next theory, not the next meeting, the next action. And then they did it. That mindset alone separates the top 10% from everyone else. Here's something else I learned about success that most people misunderstand. Success is not dramatic. It's not a single breakthrough moment. It's a series of small actions repeated every single day. Think about that carefully. Your life today is the result of the actions you took yesterday. Your success tomorrow will come from the actions you take today. And that's why less talk and more action is so powerful, because action compounds. Every phone call, every page written, every workout, every new skill practiced, each one seems small, but together they create momentum. And momentum is one of the most powerful forces in human achievement. Once you begin moving forward consistently, something interesting happens. Confidence grows, clarity increases, opportunities appear. Why? Because the world responds to movement. People who take action attract attention. They attract support. They attract new possibilities. But people who only talk about their goals remain invisible. Let me challenge you with a question that might change the way you think. What if the only thing standing between you and your goals is the number of actions you're willing to take? Think about that. Not your talent, not your background, not your circumstances, just the number of actions. I've met individuals who started with nothing, no connections, no money, no advantages, and built extraordinary lives simply because they took action every single day. They made more calls. They knocked on more doors. They tried more ideas. They failed more often. But because they kept moving, they eventually succeeded. Meanwhile, others with greater talent stayed stuck because they were waiting for motivation, waiting for confidence, waiting for the perfect moment. Let me share a principle I teach in my seminars that has helped thousands of people transform their productivity. Action comes before motivation, not after. Most people believe they need to feel motivated before they start. But psychology shows the opposite is true. You start first. Then motivation follows. When you begin working, your brain releases energy. Progress creates excitement. Small wins build momentum. And suddenly you feel motivated, but only because you started. That means the real secret to success is incredibly simple. Start before you feel ready. Do the first step, then the next, then the next. Another mistake I see people make is over-planning. Planning is important, of course. I'm a huge believer in clear goals and strategic thinking. But planning becomes dangerous when it turns into procrastination. I've seen people spend months preparing to launch a business, months researching, months analyzing, months discussing, but they never actually launch. Meanwhile, someone else with half the preparation simply starts and learns along the way. And guess who wins? The person in motion. There's an old business principle that says, speed of implementation is everything. Ideas have no value without execution. Plans have no value without action. Dreams have no value without movement. And the world rewards people who execute quickly. Now, let me be very clear about something. Taking action does not mean reckless action. It means intelligent action. You think carefully. You choose a direction. And then you move decisively. One of the best habits you can develop starting today is asking yourself a powerful question every morning. What is the most important action I can take today? Not 10 things, not 20 things, just one. Because when you identify the single most important action and complete it, you move your life forward in a meaningful way. And when you do that every day, something extraordinary happens. Progress becomes inevitable. Another powerful truth I want you to remember is this. Talking creates the illusion of progress. When you discuss your goals with friends, when you explain your plans, when you describe what you're going to accomplish, your brain actually feels a temporary sense of achievement. But nothing has changed in the real world. No progress, no results, only words. And this is why many people remain stuck for years. They talk themselves into feeling productive without actually producing anything. Successful people guard against this trap. They talk less. They act more. They understand that results come from behavior, not conversation. Let me give you a practical challenge right now. Think about one goal you've been discussing for a long time. Maybe it's starting a business. Maybe it's writing a book. Maybe it's improving your health. Maybe it's learning a new skill. Now ask yourself honestly, what action could I take today within the next 24 hours that would move this goal forward? Not next month, not next year, today. Because the distance between where you are and where you want to be is filled with actions. Thousands of small, consistent actions. And the sooner you start, the sooner momentum begins. I often say that successful people develop what I call a bias for action. When faced with opportunity, they move. When faced with a challenge, they respond. When faced with uncertainty, they experiment. They don't freeze, they act. And every action makes them stronger, smarter, and more capable. The truth is that life rewards motion. Energy attracts opportunity. Effort creates visibility. Action creates results. And the more you act, the more doors begin to open. But there's another powerful reason why action is so important, and most people overlook it. Action builds courage. Fear thrives in inactivity. The longer you wait, the bigger the fear becomes. But the moment you take the first step, fear begins to shrink. Every action weakens doubt. Every attempt strengthens confidence. And before long, you begin to see yourself differently. Not as someone who talks about goals, but as someone who pursues them. And that identity shift can transform your entire future. So let me ask you another important question. Are you someone who talks about success or someone who creates it? Because the answer to that question is determined by one thing, your willingness to act. And in the next part, I'm going to share several powerful principles that will help you eliminate hesitation, overcome procrastination, and train yourself to become a person of massive action, the kind of person who consistently turns ideas into results. But before we continue, I want you to take a moment and commit to something simple. If you're ready to stop overthinking and start moving toward your goals, write this in the comments. Less talk, more action. Because that single decision repeated every day can completely change the direction of your life. Let me continue with something I've seen again and again in the lives of high achievers. They don't just take action once. They build a lifestyle of action. That means action becomes their default response to opportunity, to problems, and even to fear. Instead of hesitating, instead of analyzing endlessly, they move forward. And the more they move forward, the easier action becomes. Now I want you to think about this carefully. Every habit you have today was built through repetition. Good habits and bad habits follow the same rule. What you do repeatedly becomes automatic. If you repeatedly delay, procrastinate, and postpone, hesitation becomes your habit. But if you repeatedly take action, even small action, you train your mind to move quickly. And this is one of the greatest competitive advantages you can develop in life. Speed. Not rushing recklessly, but acting decisively. I once worked with a sales professional who completely transformed his career using this principle. When we first spoke, he told me he spent hours every day preparing, organizing, and thinking about sales strategies. But when it came time to actually make calls or meet clients, he delayed. He told me something I'll never forget. He said, "I feel busy all day, but I'm not getting results." That's a powerful realization. Many people confuse activity with productivity. They stay busy organizing files, answering emails, planning systems, or discussing ideas. But the activities that truly create results, the difficult actions, get postponed. So I gave him a simple rule. Before doing anything else in the morning, he had to complete the single most important action in his business: contacting potential clients. No preparation, no delay, just action. At first it felt uncomfortable. His mind resisted. He wanted to organize first, review notes, analyze scripts. But I insisted that he act immediately. Within a few weeks, something incredible happened. His confidence increased dramatically. Why? Because every day he proved to himself that he could take action despite discomfort. And when you repeatedly prove something to yourself, your identity changes. You stop seeing yourself as someone who hesitates. You start seeing yourself as someone who executes. That shift is powerful because success is deeply connected to identity. The actions you take reinforce the story you believe about yourself. If you repeatedly avoid action, you unconsciously label yourself as someone who procrastinates. But if you repeatedly take action, even when it's difficult, you begin to think of yourself as a person who gets things done. And once that identity forms, productivity becomes natural. Let me share another principle that has helped thousands of people become dramatically more effective. Successful people focus on high-value actions. Not all actions are equal. Some activities move your life forward significantly. Others barely move the needle. Imagine two people working 8 hours a day. One spends most of the time on low-impact tasks, checking messages, organizing minor details, attending unnecessary meetings. The other focuses on the few activities that directly create results: building relationships, improving skills, producing valuable work, solving meaningful problems. Both are busy, but only one is productive. And over time, that difference becomes enormous. So the question you must constantly ask yourself is this: is this action moving me closer to my goal? If the answer is no, then you must have the discipline to redirect your energy. One of the most valuable exercises you can do is something I call the action audit. Take a moment at the end of your day and review how you spent your time. Ask yourself 3 questions. What actions created the most value today? What actions created little or no value? And what important actions did I avoid? This kind of reflection is incredibly powerful because awareness leads to improvement. Once you see where your time is truly going, you can start making better decisions. And better decisions lead to better results. Now let me address one of the biggest enemies of action: perfectionism. Perfectionism sounds positive on the surface. People say they want to do things perfectly, produce flawless work, and achieve the highest standards. But in reality, perfectionism often becomes a sophisticated form of procrastination. People delay starting because they want the perfect idea. They delay finishing because they want perfect conditions. They delay launching because they fear imperfect results. But perfection is not the path to success. Progress is. In fact, some of the most successful projects, businesses, and careers in the world began imperfectly. They started rough. They evolved through action. They improved through feedback. And that's exactly how real success works. You begin, you learn, you adjust, you improve. But none of that happens without action. I want to share a mindset that has helped me tremendously over the years. Instead of asking, how can I do this perfectly? Ask, how can I start this quickly? That one shift changes everything. Because starting quickly creates momentum. Momentum creates learning. Learning creates improvement. And improvement eventually leads to excellence. Another powerful strategy for becoming more action-oriented is something I call the 5-minute rule. Whenever you face a task you've been avoiding, tell yourself you will work on it for just 5 minutes, not an hour. not the whole project, just 5 minutes. Here's why this works. The hardest part of any task is starting. Once you begin, your brain naturally wants to continue. Resistance fades, focus increases, and those 5 minutes often turn into 30 minutes or more. This simple technique has helped people overcome procrastination in writing, business, studying, exercising, and countless other areas. Because action, even tiny action, breaks the barrier of hesitation. Let me tell you another truth about success that many people ignore. The world does not reward intentions. It rewards results. You might have brilliant ideas. You might have incredible plans. You might have strong ambitions. But until those ideas are translated into action, they have no impact. Think about some of the greatest innovators and entrepreneurs in the world. They didn't just imagine possibilities. They executed relentlessly. They experimented. They built. They launched. They failed. And they tried again. Their advantage was not that they never made mistakes. Their advantage was that they took more action than anyone else. Now I want you to think about the goals you truly care about, the life you want to build, the impact you want to create, the person you want to become. None of that will happen through thinking alone. It will happen through consistent, focused, disciplined action. And the beautiful thing about action is that it puts you in control. You cannot control every outcome. You cannot control every circumstance. But you can always control your next action. And when you focus on the next action, instead of worrying about the entire journey, progress becomes much easier. So instead of asking, how will I achieve this huge goal? Ask a different question. What is the next step? Just the next step. That question simplifies everything. Take the step. Then ask again. What's the next step? Take that one too. And before long, you will look back and realize that the path you once thought was impossible was built through small, consistent actions. Now there is another principle that separates high performers from everyone else, and it's something I've observed in every successful field. They develop what I call action discipline. Discipline means doing what needs to be done even when you don't feel like doing it. And this is crucial because motivation is unreliable. Some days you'll feel inspired. Other days you won't. But successful people do not wait for motivation. They rely on discipline. They act because the action is important, not because they feel excited. In fact, many of the most productive days in your life will be the days when you didn't feel like working but chose to act anyway. Those are the days that build character. Those are the days that build momentum. Those are the days that separate professionals from dreamers. Let me ask you something very important. What would your life look like 1 year from now if you took consistent action every single day toward your biggest goals? Imagine the skills you could develop, the relationships you could build, the opportunities you could create. The results could be extraordinary, but only if you act. Now let me share something that may be the most important realization in your entire journey towards success. Your future is not created by your intentions. It is created by your actions. Every day you wake up with a choice. You can move closer to your goals, or you can move further away. There is no neutral ground in life. Either you are advancing through action, or you are drifting through inaction. And once you truly understand this, something powerful begins to happen in your thinking. You stop asking, do I feel like doing this today? Instead, you start asking, is this action moving me toward the life I want? That single shift in thinking can completely transform your productivity. Over the years, I've studied thousands of successful individuals across different industries, entrepreneurs, executives, athletes, creators, professionals, and one pattern appears again and again. They all develop a habit of immediate action. When an opportunity appears, they act. When an idea emerges, they test it. When a challenge arises, they respond. They don't wait for perfect conditions. They don't wait for absolute certainty. They move quickly, learn quickly, and adapt quickly. This speed of action gives them an enormous advantage over everyone else. Think about how most people approach opportunity. They hesitate. They analyze. They talk about it. They debate it. They wait for reassurance. And while they are doing all of this, someone else has already taken action. That person has already started learning. Already started. Building momentum. Already started moving forward. And by the time the hesitant person finally decides to act, the opportunity has often passed. Life rewards the people who move. Now I want to introduce you to a powerful concept that can dramatically accelerate your success. I call it the 72-hour rule. Whenever you set a new goal or identify an important idea, you must take some form of action within 72 hours. Not next month, not someday, within 3 days. Why is this so important? Because if you don't act within 72 hours, the probability that you will ever act drops dramatically. The idea begins to fade. The excitement disappears. Other distractions take over. But when you act quickly, you lock the goal into your behavior. You turn intention into movement, and movement creates progress. Now the action you take within those 72 hours doesn't have to be huge. It can be small. You can research the first step. You can contact someone. You can begin the first draft. You can schedule the first meeting. The size of the action is not what matters. What matters is establishing momentum. Because once momentum begins, everything becomes easier. Let me also address something that stops many people from taking action: the fear of failure. This fear can be incredibly powerful. It whispers in your mind that things might go wrong, that you might make mistakes, that you might be judged by others. But here is the truth. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of success. Every successful person you admire has experienced setbacks, mistakes, and disappointments. The difference is that they didn't allow those experiences to stop them. They treated them as feedback. They adjusted their approach, and then they acted again. In fact, the more ambitious your goals are, the more action you must be willing to take. And with more action will inevitably come more mistakes. But each mistake contains valuable information. Each attempt brings you closer to mastery. Each action is taken strengthens your resilience. One of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself after any setback is this: what did I learn from this experience? That question turns failure into progress, and progress keeps you moving forward. Now there is another secret to maintaining consistent action over the long term. Surround yourself with people who act. Environment has an enormous influence on behavior. If you spend most of your time with people who constantly discuss ideas but rarely execute them, you will unconsciously adopt the same pattern. But when you surround yourself with individuals who take initiative, who pursue goals, who solve problems and build things, their energy influences you. Action becomes normal. Momentum becomes contagious. This is why successful people often seek out communities of other ambitious individuals. They understand that the right environment reinforces the right behavior. Another key principle I want to share with you is the power of daily action goals. Most people set outcome goals. They say things like, I want to earn more money, or I want to grow my business, or I want to get healthier. Those goals are important. But the real progress happens when you define the daily actions that produce those outcomes. For example, if your goal is better health, the daily actions might include exercise, nutritious meals, and proper rest. If your goal is professional growth, the daily actions might include learning new skills, building relationships, and producing valuable work. When you focus on daily actions instead of distant outcomes, success becomes far more achievable. Because every day gives you a fresh opportunity to act. And when you accumulate hundreds of positive actions over time, the results become inevitable. Now I want to leave you with one final perspective that can reshape how you approach your entire life. Imagine two people with the same talents, the same education, and the same opportunities. One person talks frequently about their ambitions. They discuss their dreams, their plans, their ideas, but they rarely take meaningful action. The other person talks very little about their goals. Instead, they work, they experiment, they build, they learn, they act every single day. Now imagine where those two individuals will be 5 years from now. The difference will be enormous, not because of intelligence, not because of luck, but because of action. And that's why the principle we've discussed today is so powerful. Less talk, more action. When you live by that principle, you eliminate one of the biggest barriers to success: hesitation. You replace endless discussion with forward movement. You transform ideas into results. And step by step, action by action, you begin building a life that reflects your highest potential. So here's my challenge to you. Starting today, become a person of action. When you have an idea, test it. When you see an opportunity, move toward it. When you set a goal, take the first step immediately. Stop waiting for the perfect time. Stop waiting for complete confidence. Stop waiting for permission. Act. Because every action you take is a vote for the person you are becoming. Every action strengthens your discipline. Every action builds momentum. And momentum will carry you further than you ever imagined. Let me ask you one final question. What action will you take today that your future self will thank you for. Think about that carefully. Then don't just think about the answer. Go and do it. And before you leave, I want you to anchor this mindset in your mind. If you're committed to living by this principle, write this in the comments right now. Less talk, more action, starting today. Because the moment you decide to act consistently, your path towards success truly begins.